Hi everybody, I recently finished playing The Witcher 1. Yes, I genuinely sat through the entirety of the first Witcher game. Twice, actually, I did 2 playthroughs of it. So today I wanted to talk about my experience with The Witcher 1. If you've never seen or heard of the first Witcher game, you've only played The Witcher 3, you might be wondering why am I talking this way about The Witcher 1? Well, that's mostly because of one reason. It's rough. It's a rough game. Everything from the way it looks to the way it feels to the way it plays, everything about it is rough and dated. The first Witcher game, believe it or not, and it's such a goofy fact, this game was made on the same engine as Neverwinter Nights. This game is just rough. The first thing that people always talk about is the combat, how much the combat sucks. And I'm gonna be a bit of a contrarian here. I'm gonna say something that might blow your minds if you've played this game. I don't think it's that bad. It's repetitive for sure. It's just select the type of weapon like silver or steel and then just select the type of attack and then you attack. But the funny thing about this game's combat is that there's a rhythm to it. You have to attack at certain times and if you time it just right, you do the most damage. Now this combat can be clunky, boring, repetitive, but it's not that bad. It is genuinely not that bad as some people claim it is. The combat can be kind of fun, because if you got a good rhythm going, it's kind of enjoyable and its animations are good enough to look at. The main downside of this combat is that it does get kind of repetitive, because this game can like stretch on, and the combat doesn't really evolve all that much. You get different weapons, you get new abilities and new powers and all that, but most of the combat stays the same, and for like most action-oriented combat, that's fine, because you know, slicing someone open stays fun. But with this, with a rhythm game, the downside of it is that it does get repetitive, but combat is honestly not that bad. I found myself kind of enjoying it, because if you turn your brain off and you just follow the rhythm, it's kind of nice actually, it's kind of cool. The most weird way. I think the reason why most people bounce off this game is the prologue. My god, this is genuinely, I won't blame you if you quit the game like right after this point, or even before you get to like the first chapter. The prologue in this game is one of the worst moments in the entire Witcher trilogy. Maybe in all of video games. It is such a terrible, terrible introduction. Everything is rough. You play this game, you finally get controls, and then the game looks ugly as shit, and you have this weird ass combat system. And the character models look terrible, and like everything looks so goofy. When I first started playing The Witcher 1, I was literally so close to quitting it, like in the prologue. I'm glad that I didn't though, because this game is genuinely kind of good. Actually, I would kind of argue that it is underrated. But it's just a terrible introduction. The thing with an RPG like The Witcher, which is just full of Eurojank, you kind of have to look past these flaws and look at what is there, instead of, you know, oh my god, this game looks terrible. It is totally fair if you bounce off this game. If you've only played The Witcher 3 and you are like a bit of a casual gamer, don't play this game. It's nothing wrong with being a casual gamer, just don't play this game. I would honestly not recommend it. If you have a genuine interest in the world of The Witcher and you are able to, and just if you are interested in The Witcher, just play it. Like, I think it's pretty cheap. You can at least try it out. What I do recommend, push through the prologue. The game genuinely gets better. That's my biggest advice if you are to play this game. By the end of the game, like once all the revelations have come and everything's kind of unfolding, you might actually start to see that this game is good. But just push for the prologue, I promise it gets better. Now another thing, like the gameplay is one thing. The game just looks rough pretty much. And that is down to the fact, as I said, this game was made on the same engine as Neverwinter fucking Nights. I think it's the Aurora engine by BioWare, which isn't the same engine that they used to make like Mass Effect, because Mass Effect released in the same year, Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 1 looks good. At least I remember it looking good, like outside of the Legendary Edition. So having this game come out in the same year as Mass Effect, it kind of looks even rougher. But if you play a lot of RPGs like this, you start to notice that these games are often made by small studios that have sometimes very little experience, but very big ambition. They don't have a lot of resources, but they are gonna try to make the best damn game they can. The Witcher 1 is an example of that, because although the game looks shit, you can tell there's genuine care in the presentation in a way that I have not seen in so many games. The cinematography, I have to say, is genuinely incredible, because the camera floats around really goofy, but they really try their fucking hardest to make this game look as cinematic as possible, and it is genuinely impressive. Because although, like, you can tell the limitations they had a creative vision for what they wanted the game to be, and that is genuinely impressive. I have to remind you, at this point in time, CD Projekt Red had never made like a full game before. I think they did like technical work, they did like minor stuff. This is the first time that they developed a full video game, and for it to be this impressive is kind of insane. The cinematography, as I said, is just incredible. There's shots in this game that you don't see in like big AAA games, like just the amount of care that was put into it. And the thought behind it, it's impressive. You can tell that these guys really cared about The Witcher, they were big fans. And the game really does nail the feel of being a Witcher. You know, this game really makes you feel like a Witcher, to put it in IGN terms. Because, you know, The Witcher 3 is this big ass game. The Witcher 3 is kind of mainstream. That's how big it is. It's one of the best selling games of all time. But The Witcher 1, I have to remind you, most people did not know what a Witcher was at this point in time. So having a game where like preparation is half the battle, and you have these different swords, and you have this like unique lifestyle, and you get to play as this character who's pretty much just bred for fighting monsters. Back in 2007, this was the first time I think that you had something like a Witcher, and it is just done very well. There are things to improve, of course. Most of it is improved by the time of The Witcher 3. But for a first crack at this like Witcher type gameplay, it's kind of cool, you know, how you utilize your different swords, and having to read books before you can like strip an enemy of their components, using witches' mutagens and stuff like that. It's done kind of cool. And what I think this game does well is kind of the life on the path at times, you know, having these monster contracts. So to recap, so far the gameplay is kind of alright, it's kind of repetitive, but it's good enough. The game looks kind of rough graphically, especially compared to the other games that were out at this time, but the cinematography is incredible, and I do have to say, although it isn't the most graphically impressive game, it is kind of stylized and pretty nice looking at times, especially if you download a mod for it, the big visual mod on Nexus that I used. This game can look kind of peaceful and nice, and it has this nice vibe to it, especially in some of the villages. But I do think, although it's not the most graphically impressive, it is stylized at least, so it's not too ugly to look at, and I think it can be quite nice. Like this very amateurish painting or something, it can have its own charm, in a way. Now the big thing why I think you should play this game, and something that you can't really experience like if you're watching a Let's Play, the story of this game and the choice and consequence is incredible. This game has a very good story, but there's certain parts of the story that I think are very good, some of are less good. I won't go into spoilers, but I think Salamandra is kind of a boring entity. I don't know, they never really do it for me. But you don't play this game for Salamandra, let me tell you that. Most of the game is about Salamandra, and without going into spoilers, this game gets so much better with its story. I really want to talk about it, but in case you haven't played these games and you're just watching this, if you're like, you need an objective opinion if you have to play these games, I would recommend them. Just because this part of the story is just genuinely incredibly written. I think this part of the story is up there with like anything in The Witcher 3, with how good it is written. I don't know how this small Polish video game studio, this small developer, managed to write a story that is this fucking good. With like the experience that they had, they never made a game. They had barely any budget. They were working on a shitty engine. How, with all that working against them, did they make a story that is this fucking good? And the choice and consequence is genuinely impressive. The thing with The Witcher, the trilogy of The Witcher games, the choice and consequence between games is barely there. You can import a save from previous games, but it barely does anything. It does a few things from Witcher 1 to Witcher 2, and like from The Witcher 2 to The Witcher 3, it barely does anything. The choice and consequences between games is not as good as I think Mass Effect does it. But in this single game, the story can unfold. There's so many differences. in like the way things go, just based on the choices you make. And choices that seem like pretty minor can have very big impact in the same game. So I think that The Witcher handles choice and consequence in a single game better than the Mass Effect games, because in Mass Effect, like, that doesn't change much in the game in itself, but what it kind of falls flat on is just the choice and consequence between games, and that is something that Mass Effect does better. But speaking about The Witcher 1, there's so many things that can change, and like different outcomes. Not as impressive as The Witcher 2, but considering the budget they had and like the way this game was made, the experience they had, it is so impressive that they managed to account for all these different outcomes. And as I said, the story is good. The big thing that happens in this game, which I won't spoil, but you get like the revelation right at the end, it is done very well. And the writing in the final section of the game is stellar. It is some of the best writing in the entire Witcher trilogy, in all of role-playing games actually. As I said, how did this small studio make something this fucking good? I'm so shocked when I first played it. And especially in my second playthrough, I started to appreciate the things that this game did more. It has just some absolutely incredible writing. If you like the Witcher universe, or just The Witcher 3, and you don't mind a bit of Eurojank, or just want to try it out, I would honestly recommend it. The story, it takes a while to kind of get going, but once it does, it is very good. And once you get to the end, like, everything retroactively becomes even better. If I had to compare it to anything, it's kind of like Knights of the Old Republic, but because something happens in that game that makes you think, wow, everything that happens is kind of interesting, and they really thought about this, and then you start to put the puzzle pieces together. And this game has the same situation, where something happens in this game that just makes you look back on the game and think, wait a minute. In retrospect, the game becomes even much better knowing this revelation. I wouldn't Google any spoilers, I would just play this game, honestly, because it is genuinely good. One thing I do have to criticize the game for, I think some of the areas are just such a slog. Like the swamps of Vizima are so boring. And you have to keep backtracking every single time. And then if you want to go back to Vizima, you have to watch this entire fucking cutscene. You have to talk to some guy. Some parts of this game are just a genuine slog. You have to push for that, honestly. The swamps are probably, they have some interesting moments. There's some interesting stuff that happens there, but it's such a slog to get through. So anyway, that's pretty much my opinion on The Witcher 1. I think it is such an incredible game. Even if it isn't particularly good, I think it is one of the most impressive games ever made, pretty much. Because the writing is on a level that it should not be. There is no conceivable way that this game has any right to have writing that is this good. In a lot of games, this wouldn't be all that special, but considering what they came from, CD Projekt Red, this is such an incredible game. And so that's pretty much what I think about The Witcher 1. I think it is genuinely a good game. It has a few niggles. The combat gets repetitive, can be a bit of a slog to play through, and the introduction is terrible. But a lot of the flaws I see in the game, I think come from like the budget constraints. I do think the game gets kind of weird. By the end, there's some stuff that happens that I think is a little bit too goofy. And the last part of the game, the last chapter, feels definitely rushed. I don't think it should have been any much longer, because then this game would just drag on and on. But it does feel kind of rushed. Also doesn't help is that they kind of shot themselves in the foot by how ambitious they were with the choice and consequence. Because that all like to come back in like the last chapter or so. So writing this chapter is such a nightmare, because there's so many different choices that you could have made throughout the game. I can definitely understand why the last chapter is the way that it is. I do think they kind of ran out of budget by the end of it. So anyway, The Witcher 1, I think it's worth a play. If you are a casual gamer, don't play this. There's nothing wrong with being a casual gamer, I have to make that very clear. This game is probably not for you, because you have to look through so many bullshit in order to enjoy this game. If you played The Witcher 3 and, like me, you became interested in the Witcher universe and you think, well, you know, I'm interested to try it, just do it. It's a good game. It has so many strengths that I think are worth experiencing on your own. And in a way that a Let's Play can't really do justice, in my opinion. So yeah, just play The Witcher 1. I think it's a good game. I would honestly defend it if needed. So yeah, thank you for watching. Goodbye.